Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. So sorry for not having my video on. There's a power outage in this side of the country. So, my the first poem I'm reading is The Crescent's Quest, titled The Crescent's Quest. And Atlantis has risen in my degree. Gallets blowing out prayers to grow gills, padding limbs have become wet wings, too weak for ascension. Shore is beneath the flood, and the people have to drown to get to land. Faith, diluted, knuckled in soggy tongues, hyponatremia bodies and submarine homes, breedless trees, soaked vegetables, flushed zoo, marinated apes in the cold arms of water. In the center of the city, a mosque holds its crescent above the flood, begging God for liberation from this damning claims. Lord, if this be another Genesis, from whose tongue will the prophecy drift? The city is gorged and heavy with its tears. The people are filtering into the fringes in fish boats, awaiting the sun to burn out the flood and warm their homes. And they'll flock back with thirsty feet and hungry lungs to tell the tale how they have become almajiris in their own city. This poem, a miserable riddle, tell me how a city of water can be deserted. Tell me how a flood can be burned. So that's the first one. Um, the second poem is titled Through the Horizon. So yeah, it goes. The dead become undead when the day dies. So I learn to see better in the dark. It's 8:30 a.m. I walk into a room empty of your body, full of your spirit. The paintings on the wall, a thread of memories lying into each corner. I try to decipher the paintings with my hands, to reach through each canvas, reach through, to reach you. To speak to the dead, one has to understand the language of silence and the rising of breath and death. I inhale the dark to contain you in the aura of my body, holding my breath for as long as I can, not wanting to lose you again. And now I no longer fear the night. That is to say, I have learned to accompany myself in loneliness and hold you in the complexion of my body, in my memory, as the night holds darkness. I feel the dark unravel around me, your spirit disappearing into my shadow, wearing you into my being. I teach myself to be you, to let go like you did. So I walk out, leaving the door open for you to come through. That's the second, and I would like to read a third poem, a short one. I think this was published um, in the recent issue. So it's titled Brewing Miracle. Inside the coffee shop, fate holds every traveler by the shoulder. There is a whirlwind outside, and everyone's thoughts gamble for a calm. The atmosphere of the cafe is as somber as the face of cold espresso, the only lighting a thin ray lasering through the small window. On the bistro table, a couple make promises over their glasses of mocha, and you can see God's laughter streaming in their cups. The spider web by the wall takes the form of a dream catcher, and the heat from brewing coffee untangles it. There is a coat leaning hopelessly behind the banquet chair, the ceiling falling like a dera, and for a moment there is silence, as if waiting for a miracle to walk in. Thank you very much.
I'm going to read two poems. Shameless plug. I have a chapbook that just came out called Brown Sugar Skin. It's available on Amazon, and I'm going to put my socials in the chat as well. This first poem is called In This House We Don't Say I Love You. Even though there are 6 words for love in Tamil, instead we say chapdia. We say, have you eaten? We say, I'll make you a plate. We say, how's the food? We say, you look thin. We say, you've gained weight. We say, how are your studies? We say, how is Amma? We say, do you have a boyfriend yet? We say, cherry. We say, okay. We slice a plate of fruit. We double bag leftovers for you. We slip $50 in your back pocket. We drive you to the airport. We pack you a snack for the plane. Even though we know it might be years before we see you again, even though we know we will never see you again, we don't say goodbye. We say, Poitavango. We say, come back soon. We say, Poitavaren. We say, I'll come back soon. And then this next poem is the poem that was included in the journal, and it's called What I Did Today Instead of Writing a Poem. Google gestation period of an elephant. Despite not being an elephant, worried that my unborn child might belong to a terrible boyfriend that I recently broke up with 7 years ago. Googled vaginal childbirth, promptly threw my computer out the window, did a Kegel, watched a prenatal yoga video while eating a bowl of Doritos, did another Kegel, examined the 20-week ultrasound photos, worried that the baby doesn't look like me, texted my husband at work to see if he likes me as a friend or more than a friend, went to the grocery store, bought a 12-pack of Pepsi. When the cashier asked me how far along I am, showed him my wedding ring and told him to stop flirting with me. Went to the library, checked out, making more milk, breastfeeding doesn't need to suck, and your pregnancy after 35. Googled geriatric pregnancy, read about all the risks associated with giving birth at 35. I'm 39. Visited my geriatric parents. Listened to my mom talk about how easy breastfeeding is. Ate half a pound cake. Ignored my mom when she asked when I last ate a vegetable. Did another Kegel discreetly. Googled how big the baby should be by now. Googled how big is a sweet potato. Spent 30 minutes researching different varieties of sweet potato. Roasted a sweet potato and called my mom to tell her that I am having vegetables for dinner. Thank you for listening.
I'm going to read a couple poems from the issue and then one short poem that I wrote on the day, the morning after the election. My first poem is called At the Holy Gates, the Heavenly Ones. We are sorry to announce that we have begun requiring two-factor authentication for access. We have sent a code to your first hotmail.com email address. The 6-digit code is also equal to the number of sunsets you ignored, the number of children playing you never paused to watch, and the smiles you never cracked for people in checkout lines. We're sorry, that is incorrect. We've texted a 5-digit code to the number of your first Nokia flip phone, the code equal to the number of people whose eyes you failed to meet as you walked by, dollars not given to those that asked, and kisses smooched without feeling. We've locked your account. Choose one of these personal safeguard questions to answer. What was the middle name of the person you first thought about as you masturbated? What was the phone number of the person that you were most cruel to in 7th grade? How many meals did you fail to thank your mother for? That is incorrect. Please prove that you are human by clicking on all the memories of moments where you were not fully conscious of the miracles going on all around you. Continue to click on new memories as they appear. You will never exhaust them all. If you continue to click irrationally, hoping to finish up making up for your life, this will verify that you are human and that you deserve nothing ever resembling a heaven at all. The second poem is called Motherfuckers. It's a poem about love. A flock of balloons on strings in the wind, blowing, bouncing off each other and off the poor woman's head. Struggling among the multicolored maelstrom of kids' birthday balloons, pulling, tugging them in tangles through the gusts of wind in a parking lot, finally screaming, "Motherfuckers!" as she tangled and untangled herself. And it was a moment of complicated feeling as she saw that I saw, understanding the love gone into choosing this bundle of helium wishes for a child, the exasperation and frustration, embarrassment and anger at the frustration, sadness at the anger, the feeling of failure. It was all there in her face, all the difficulties of loving in this wind-swept world where kindness is lighter than air. And I have been there, failing at the holding on and saying it to myself as well. I imagine saying, "Darling, You don't need to try so hard. You can fail at being your best. You can even let go. Let them float off into skies, getting smaller, rising, smaller, and vanishing. Gravity pulls us down, and let it rest, your heart. Just a moment is enough. Even the love that gets away, above till we can't see it anymore, even it finds that place beyond all skies where we are no longer alone. And this last little poem is just a tiny little morsel trying to express how I felt on the morning after the election. To lose is the most human of things. To build so hard, to see it crumble. Things we want most, only together can we make. And hands withdraw, words are left unspoken. Invisible are most human things, and spider webs subtle and swept away so easy. And I have felt the crumble, the blank gray of a dawn that brings no light. And there is breath, and then another. And in the trees at first light, a bird exhales a plaintive cry, a sigh, and the air embraces it a moment. It rings, and letting go, it ceases, failing like all things. And the quiet in the mist breeze and the wind stirs, and you know that to lose, to end, to crumble is the cost of living and loving, and we want to continue paying. Thank you.
So this first poem borrows a line from an interview that Diane Seuss did. It appeared in the New Yorker. I'm a person who believes in loneliness. Diane Seuss, the New Yorker, May 23rd, 2024. I believe in the dim. I've walked those cliffs before. It doesn't matter where. Half echo, half mist, the half-empty milk glass my domain. I believe in long night runs with a yellow Sony Walkman when one is young and still has legs that work, if they ever did. In the woods, alone on a cobbled sunlit trail, a momentary flicker of connection. I am sensed and sensing, reminded of my belonging. I dreamt I slept most soundly within the confines of an instrument case, soft foam and crushed velvet, cradling each specific curve. 3 solid latches closing behind me with a click. I was a safe. I believe in Casper the Friendly Ghost and his melancholy, hopeful ways, but not the uncles, that ghastly trio. I don't think they have his best interests at heart. In the lake, just today, another flicker. Neck deep and eye level with a northern swallow, green gold ripples flowing outward from my sternum. I am origin and destination, sensed and sensing, world-worthy, vanished. The leaves of the swamp maple outside my bedroom window reach toward me with their gifts of oxygen and shade. I've made a record of my gratitude, a heavy ledger. I believe in sorrow, in plays of light in the balance, but still it hurts. I'm lost in the lost soundtrack and the psychedelic furs. Can you see right through me? I sat on a footbridge in Ithaca, high above a muddy creek, head on my knees. But I don't want to scare people. I just want to make friends. I believe in the ghost in you, in loneliness, in a person who believes in loneliness. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. And she did. Pages and pages of flowers, some lovely rose, geraniums soft with light. I've marked them all in wax pastels. Here, I'll show you. Do you remember the heat that summer? The abundance of hydrangea? It doesn't have to make sense. I was pretty. I was pink. The desert island question is my favorite. Okay. This next one I'm going to read came from a prompt that Diane Seuss gave over the summer, and it was, I just want to say, because it was after the poem by Eduardo Carrel, lines written during my second pandemic. So this poem is after that. Lines written during the hottest July on record, after Eduardo C. Carrel. Grief blooms in the heat, like patches of blue-green algae at the far end of the lake. The stiff soles of grief's new shoes echo in an empty church. I glean the last bits of grief from the bottom of a salt and vinegar potato chip bag. Grief flaps in the wind like sun-bleached towels on the clothesline. A red-tailed hawk over a field of hickory and Queen Anne's lace cries out in grief's perfect pitch. Grief, a catch in the hip, limps across the earthen dam. Caught in a sudden rain shower, rings of grief multiply and expand. From the riverbank, I catch grief, throw it back. Grief never asks if I am ready. Late afternoon, the oldest window AC unit in the house churns out grief's cold lullaby. I brush tufts of grief from the old dog's back, watch it take flight. Grief requires wide margins, bold fonts. After the heavy rains, grief, like the bloated blue hydrangea, cannot withstand itself. Grief plays on beyond the final whistle, no penalties. Birds gather grief to use as nesting materials. Grief is slippery when wet. Quiet flash of fireflies in the middle of July. Grief's kiss, smiled sigh. Grief remembers the words to all three verses of Silent Night. Grief is allergic to feathers. We carry our grief in 5-gallon buckets, wheelbarrows, conch shells, clavicles. I sign my name in grief's black ink.
I appreciate the opportunity to read tonight. I'm going to first read the poem that is in the journal. It feels more relevant to me even than when I wrote it and when it was accepted. It's called Daniel Ellsberg is Interviewed a few weeks before he died at 92 years old. And for some of you who may not have lived back in that time and don't know about Daniel Ellsberg, he disclosed the Pentagon Papers in 1971, which were secret histories of some of the lies that were being told by America about the war in Vietnam. And then he spent the rest of his life as a peace activist. Blue-veined hands river into bony fingers, flanked the well-pressed suit that hangs on his gaunt frame. Hands rest on a desk beside a vase of morning lilies. He knows the threat of clenched fists desperate to hold power. Spent 40 years trying to prevent nuclear war he fears is nearer now than when he started. Yet, here in this photograph, he smiles straight at death, whose outstretched hands beckon. How can I grasp such conviction? With ungloved fingers, my friend mulches the weeping willow in her yard, wipes her brow and tells me, trees thrive from roots entwined with others. I link arms with a woman I've never met at a rally against gun violence, her first. Hand gripping her placard, she confides, nothing changed today, but I'm changed. I see all the doors I've knocked on that never opened, trying to elect leaders who could sway our flailing hands to embrace this world. And I thank Dr. Ellsberg for telling the reporter, I couldn't think of any better way to spend my time. I've been writing poetry all my life, but I haven't really gone out and tried to publish it and stuff until about the last 5 years. But my poetry book, To Drink from a Wider Bowl, was published by Evening Street Press in 2022. It won their Sinclair Poetry Prize. And so I'd like to read a poem from that. It's called Buying. This is, my grandson was 3 during part of the pandemic, and he was really, really into geography. So this poem is called Buying a Globe for My Grandson During the Pandemic. He can't comprehend how north means anything but sky. Thinks south is underground. So I search online. Elephants trumpet across Tanzania on talking globes. The Eiffel Tower illuminates all of Europe. Customer reviews dim the flashy displays. Irate Indian buyers, their birthplace mapped as China. Americans demand borders between states, not shown on any other country. Globes crack in careless hands. One globe arrived with 2 southern hemispheres. The owner thought it an improvement, didn't send it back. I long for a brick and mortar store to know if names of distant rivers are large enough to read. Feel the relief of the Himalayas. Spin tilted stands to test their resilience. Lands joined in a blue blur. I'm not giving up the search for a perfect world for my grandson. And I'd like to read one more short one from my chapbook on Shifting Shoals that came out from Kelsey in 2023. I live at the beach with the background behind me and this book is all about kind of living in a southern beach town, environmental issues and the people, but this one is just kind of how beautiful it is, which I think maybe we can all use these days. It's called Recipe. We know each other, morning's first beach walkers, gawking at the crimson egg that hovers on horizon's edge. We stop to watch it crack, yolk spreading across the sky, nourishing us more than anything, scrambled up in kitchens. No names, addresses, loves, longings, losses. We simply share this recipe for how to start the day. Thank you.
Just want to say I'm really excited to be here in such good company. My goodness, the poetry tonight. This is my first poem in SoFloPoJo, and I'm really excited. So I want to thank the editors, and it's a long poem, so it's the only poem I'm going to read. Never Ending Summer Poem for JRH. Before I wrote this poem that never ends, I wrote 1,000 poems that didn't know how to begin. It never occurred to us that we were lovers then, that life was giving us everything we could taste and touch, not because life liked us, but because that's what life does. The interface between sorrow and imagination was the way you supposed the story knew nothing about us, that we were free, beyond the wrathful eye of God, or whoever pens a story so big that everyone in the book believes they are the main character. So we huddled in your tiny basement room, trading secrets like baseball cards, creating collages out of colorful pictures snipped from early issues of Heavy Metal magazine, Airbrush Nude Barbarians by Richard Corbin, Green-Skinned Alien Women, A Man's Head Exploded by Laser Fire, while we failed to notice the brightness outside your basement window where a cardinal inscribed his signature in song on the air. Built a snow fort each winter of adolescence in the side yard. By then Hustler had replaced heavy metal. Took off on bicycles never to return to the selves we'd been. Your mother the dance instructor never knowing where we went. My mother dying then dead. We didn't know about madness then, but we learned how to get high with the best of them. Carved our initials everywhere, thinking we could be forever like this. But when they started construction on 696 and high school was pushing us toward the door into so-called adulthood, we got scared. You were scared Mr. Anderson, your drafting teacher, would fail you for skipping, but he was also the baseball coach and had fallen in love with your firebrand curve and made you do 1,000 push-ups before homeroom and called it good and passed you with a D-. But I was truly lost because I thought I'd found something climbing the mulberry in your backyard or zipping on our bikes past newly constructed skyscrapers lining the highway in Southfield, miles and miles from home and higher than we'd ever been together. But 696 terrified me, drawing its high arc across I-75 so close to our neighborhood. So you spray painted our initials across the new smooth surface days before it opened to traffic, and I cried like a baby cardinal, but only on the inside, 'cause we were high above that dark pavement pointing north just like a compass across the night, and still the traffic flowed like adult blood, everyone hurrying past with no life at all, and we both felt everything we'd done disappearing. And what waited outside the heavy double doors of Don Darrow High was nothing like the life we've made out of nothing but each other's company and pocket change for Hostess cherry pies. Because once we were the smallest children life could imagine for itself and made our own imagined world, and it was ours, and anything could happen, and you'd grin and make me laugh, and it didn't matter that Mom was gone because the color of the sky was summer, and the left-handed cursive you pulled across the page was us, and everything should have stayed like that forever because the life we discovered was the world underneath the world. But we were teens and so helpless against the world's pull. So I got a job at Taco Bell and you at KFC, and life interceded with its dull demands. But even 40 years later, both of us know that love is not like we imagine, and it happens sometimes in the most familiar places, and the worlds we create from our pale and urgent longing, from our innocence and grief, from our craved imaginations, are closer to the truth of the world than some punch clock life society hurls us into like undereducated meat, lean muscle for the GNP, and it's a good thing, probably, that love we fail to recognize is love untarnished, everlasting, and I hope you see why this poem can never end, and why the cardinal, unnoticed from your window, had to sing every day of the never-ending summer we lived but can never return to. Thank you.
So this is my poem titled Rereading Beowulf. I Remember My Mother's Address Book. Atop her stack of cascading bills and letters like a polypal paperweight or pink and white gingham kenning, its mylar cover uncharacteristic of the middle-aged woman gatekeeping my fire drake adolescence, this blonde breaker of rings with curved bang bowl-cut hair helmet as gleamy and round as her ivory bracelet battle tusks from Thailand, an elephant graveyard stacked like slain warriors pitching about the Valhalla of her nacreous forearm and wrist. This poached score of my childhood was a cacophonous death rattle. Mornings brought finger snaps, be quiet, can't you see I'm on the phone? And every brandish of her fist, heads will roll, and the ease of her ballpoint strike through heavy and scriptorium slow across the pages moments after hearing the news of the latest friend or relative no longer around, fingering A to Z tabs for names and addresses, like my godparents, Peter and Mary Kunda at 543 Prospect Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, now gone. Into the earth and out of her cache of K's they lay near cousin Francis Klein and Dr. Korsch, each donning my mother's skull and cross-outs, her casual delineation between the living and the dead, between Christmas cards and ancient history, swift as the tornado in 1979, descending moments after I stepped from the afternoon bus with Jill Connors when her own chimney's brick struck her head. I wanted to empty her backpack and take her new supply of erasable pens, pooling like Frasia's tears, the only hope I had against my mother's hand in the seas. And I would love to read the poem I wrote the day after the election, if I may. This is called May Day, May Day. I watch airline disaster documentaries the day after the 2024 presidential election, while my optimism hits the California countryside, while my hope nosedives into the Pacific, while my joy spirals into the Peruvian jungle, while all possibility is shot down by a Russian missile, because the four chambers of my heart stall. And I attempt to glide to a smooth landing, but my landing gear won't lower. But my instruments aren't working. But my windshield has been shattered. So I tell every attendant version of myself, to tell every frightened passenger I have ever been, to brace for an emergency landing. And I adjust the flaps, pretending they will slow reality from slamming into the next 4 years. Happy to know the cockpit voice recorder will document just how badly we needed help. Thank you so much.
I'm one of the co-editors of COLA Literary Review here at the University of South Carolina, so I'd encourage all of you to submit by the end of December. I've got 5 poems, 5 short poems for you, and I'll end with the one that was published in the journal. I read a lot about farm landscape that I grew up in, and then whenever I'm not doing that, it's always city when I lived in Toronto for 6 years. So I'll start with 2 city poems, then I'll turn towards 3 more farm poems. So this first one is Sorting Shelves. At the Spadina Public Library branch, 2 men mid-50s asked directions to the comedy section, explaining they were hired to read jokes at a mattress store grand reopening. Another man, likely 80, in the Canadian history aisle called to me and said, "There's nothing less precious than the present moment. Look at the smog and moving sales." Someone at the computer desk was there for the entire afternoon, staring into the dark web of interlocking branches immediately at the windows. The librarian asked if I knew where she placed great expectations. Second one's called Every Time. With you in the Harvard Street laundromat reading your novel while I watch the TV above the coin machine, Vito Vessia upholstery closing next month, a satellite showed an image of a moon I didn't know. The 94 bus passed outside, which always reminded me of the one time we walked to where Clinton Street intersects with this street and cut lilacs with your kitchen scissors as one half of the moon I do know was bright in the background. You rose from the chair to change the load, and I noticed another 94 bus go empty past the window, and the doors seemed to act as a magnifying glass, causing a hamburger on the floor to be blown up room-sized, like something worth displaying at a museum. Now when I see it, I'm reminded how I would cross Bloor Street right behind it as I arrived at your apartment, and I would see it again after work, meeting you in the afternoon market, sitting on the sidewalk with the crossword, working on it until it was too dark on the street to see the letters, repeating the remaining clues out loud on the walk home. This next one's called Horses in the Night Field. Approaching a neighbor's poultry yard without planning to, everything on the property seemed to shine like a kind of engine. Walking up to the barn straight on made it seem like a stage prop. Spilled diesel pools populated the gravel walkway from the garage. When my sister walked up ahead of me and stood against the barn backdrop, I wondered if she also saw the horses in the night field, blurry like hotels. I noticed the underside of the moon reflecting itself onto the barn roof. Walking back on the concession road, the horses were calling us to come lay beside them. This next one is called Port Colborne. You wore a mulberry black chore coat to witness a group gathering at the lock to see the boat as if it were a reenactment of that week's funeral. The lift bridge goes up and seems to just stay there. Stepping into the Legion further down the canal with the veterans, drinking the whole interior long enough to be a pool, that way it felt like more than just sitting around. There was hockey on every television behind the bar, and I noticed how the ice on the screen kept the rest of the place from going dark. On the commercial breaks, it felt like being in the center of the barn as the sky would leave it behind. You were there across from me in defeat. Was it the loss or the loss within loss? Either way, it looked like grief. Was it dust or stardust shining next to you on the seat? And then I'll read the one from the journal. It's called, Is There a Bug in My Ear or a Motorbike on the Highway? I want you to call back and tell me right now whether the market near the Elora quarry still sells Libby's brown beans. If not, then I'll get Clark's from the Saveway and make them on your stovetop when I get there tonight. But for now, I'm driving this long haul as a favor for a friend. And something cool I saw earlier I wanted to tell you about that I'll forget if I don't say it now. Those Union Pacific cargo trains are empty. I could see right through the metal ventilation holes, so you were right all along. And one other thing. My mom said she had a dream 2 nights ago about you being all right with us selling the farm, which informed her to not feel so sad about it. And that's informing me now, knowing you can't call back, and this message will sit unheard until I get to your kitchen tonight and delete it. And I'll have to stop calling your home line because we had to sell the farm, Ray. We didn't want to, but we did. And if I see it tonight for the final time, I'll try to grab a hold of the air in there. Thank you.
I'll have three to read. The first from the journal, and then two from our excerpts from a long book-length project I'm working on about a birth control procedure I had at the end of last year, my addiction recovery, and a world that still seems to be rewarding male rage. I'm trying to parent my 4 kids, all sons, and trying to do it right in a world that seems backwards. So anyway, the first one is from the journal. A game of telephone is all I'm after here, honest. Among my host of favorite words, my favorite is chthonic. In telling you this, you know almost everything you need ever know about me. In telling you this, I am calling you my friend. In telling you this, I am engineering my own demise, halfway to becoming my truest form, halfway to Rumpelstiltskin, halfway to folklore, most of the way to fairy tale. The reason why this word is the favorite among favorites is known only to me. It isn't yours to know. It's not that I'm not willing to tell you, but the underlying reason for not telling you is one and the same of meaninglessness, of incommensurability. The plural for doppelganger is doppelganger. There's something of a non-count noun, not being able to know how many there are, naturally, and by definition, of course, natürlich und genau. Any poetic utterance ought to be a nonce word. An ounce of my blood fills a vial I keep on your side of the bed, or something like that. Another engineering of my own demise. A pound of flesh can be scraped from my topmost layer of skin. Over time, and only if you have the patience, I have a punishment demanded of me, a vengeance exacted and to exact. It's an ongoing condition, this business, and I'm a bee theorist about time. In truth, I'm a sucker for crunched consonant clusters. That's not my rationale, but an aside, a trail of breadcrumbs, most likely sourdough, because a focaccia seems daunting and sounds a mess and feels flimsy. Another thing flimsy is me, my whimsy. Chthonic is to chronic as passage is to savage. I'm trying to tell you something. I'm trying to tell you that the category of the chthonic is where I deem my tongue picks up language from some otherwise unreachable pool, some otherwise unteachable tool. A dog's tongue picks up water from its bowl using a similar anatomical mechanism. It reveals itself in such moments to be a hidden appendage. So may we all. And then these final two that I'll read back to back are from that project that I'm calling, at least for the moment, Vasecto Majestic. Trying not to hold resentments, trying to accept my addict self, no regrets. Through all this, getting snipped, haven't put it to much use, mind you, and that's okay. Trying not to fall prey to the kid-gloved fondle, trying not to drop the ball, to get caught holding the bag, to be the prince dunce, the duke's dick, Where are my epic similes? Why resort to idiom? What recourse have I left on the table and not exhausted or tossed away or turned my own back on? From where might come my tetragrammaton, my burning bush, my revelation? My snark hides heartbreak, which permeates my innermost, coursing through these burned out capillaries to reach those troubled synapses. If only all such material could be reduced. But what of the gasps and sighs that are more me than anything? My pneuma, my sukha, my pre-Socratic elemental essence. Trying to crack open a genuine smile, that old chestnut, without it breaking out into a cocksure grin. After all, what does it say about me that every cheese is a dry one, every flash of teeth a sign of warning? How about this? I caught this morning's cotton candy sky, a floss-spun fog to boot. So when I tell you I don't want any hint of bitterness, I mean it. I mean, I gotta watch for the grumps, the glooms, since resentment gets me nothing and gives me less. But even then, I took my coffee with cream and sugar, a rare and sickly sweet treat. So naturally, I come around to thinking of pineapples and that old piece of advice, a real headcanon, hazarded with a knowing wink, to ward off bitterness and turn toward the way of sugar, to give in to that craving above all else, or else, to heal my nettle-stung nethers months after, to cure my honey-tinged poison tongue, and earn back a touch, your touch, of all your going graces. I mean, come on, how else would I want it? Less bitterness, less back pay, just you, this, more. My drive sharpens as the minivan drives straight down the stretch between Cleveland and Jefferson. You can piece it together, triangulate my position. And even now you're at therapy for my mess, and my session is coming in about an hour's time. But you know how I focus with endgame precision on the moment and what's here because I have to. And I'm grateful, really, drizzled in caramel, flammable, still post-offering, sacrifice. So this is my fragrance at its innermost, this headspace, a fitting sanctum, and most of all, the best gift, this present, this, right here, the cloying, lip-smacking transience. Thanks.
So I'm going to read 3 poems for you, 3 short poems. The first poem is the one published in the journal, and then I have two poems that are unpublished, but I have lived with them for a while. So the first poem is called A Complex from an Irish Dentist. I don't recall shame or a second guess, only the pink toothbrush on the lady's desk, and a herd of adults on the other side of the table, acting as if I'd asked for more potatoes in a famine. I didn't know what I was supposed to ask for, or even want in this place that wasn't our house. I took the blue brush home, like she said, and planted it on our bathroom shelf like a seed guaranteed to grow on all kinds of terrain. And now, in any exercise of choice, it's like standing in the ditch of a country road, matted in goosegrass, stinging nettles, watching the cows stumble along in all directions, waiting for the nod from the farmer. All right. So this second poem, it's called La Petite Ceinture, which translates from French as little belt. Walking in respite from your absence, I return this time to the old railway, the little belt that surrounds Paris, where I do not stray from where we walked together, the line that kicked sand into our shoes, or brought us to the abandoned station, listening to the coos of each marauding pigeon. Along the ballast, wildflowers are in scattered bloom, as if blown from a freight train that followed you. And around the cross ties, the grass takes shallow root, standing straight, curled, or out of shape, and stretches towards a 12-foot wall, where a graffiti artiste has declared in neon indigo explosion that love is indeed dead. And so I tilt my head, as if to evade the author's heavy hand and any silenced birds falling from its grip. All right, and the final poem I'll read is called Nesting Years. When you buy a house, they say you've reached a milestone, like a working donkey on dirt terrain. You climb the ladder with wit, with fear of missing out. You count and count your pennies and golden credit score. And what's better, throwing money at the wall of rent or running with a torch for 30 years for ownership and rest? Isn't this the best? I mean, the thrill of finding dead ants on the basement floor. They excavate wood to build their nests. This sounds like chaos, like risk. I abandon rest for trotting after schemes. These liquid baits promised a fast result. Just the thing. My loaded cart rides down the aisle. Brushes, more soap, everything. Thank you so much.
So much for having me and for having the work in the journal among all of these stellar writers. I write about a lot of things, but both the poems I'm reading tonight are about place. So the first one is the one that is published in the journal, and it's called In Which a Young Bull in Baltimore is Actually a Bull. The bull escaped the slaughterhouse, leapt the wire fence on Pennsylvania Avenue, galloped along North Avenue, past the 12 o'clock boys popping wheelies on their dirt bikes, past bow-tied men from the Nation of Islam selling bean pies on the median strip, darted from art students carrying stretched canvases to class, dashed down Charles, bolted by the restaurant selling lake trout and a chicken box, raced for freedom, for the feel of the wind at his back, for a view beyond the pen. His time was running out, so what was left to lose that wasn't already lost? Police gave chase through Midtown, fired 8 rounds. He fell, dead in the street. Onlookers stood stunned. Last week, sage burned to honor the city's 227th homicide victim on this spot where today a pool of red grows wider. And the next poem is called Mussels in Galway. A mountain of mussels and him with a grin, wide as the open shells piled high on his left. The sky a beaming blue, the wind a whisper. We ease into the evening, and it's so simple to love him when he is happy, tender, vulnerable. He slips a knife into the mussel, pries it open, slurps down the briny mass with a grin. Who taught him to so casually wrest open something that is closed to him? He is learning manhood from the air around him. He's heir to its mossy musk, its cascaded catechism. When threatened, mussel shells grow thicker, toughen to hide the softness within. I read once that mussels marry their fates together. Byssal threads from one mollusk reach out, bind to another, gossamer thin, ironclad tendrils. This evening in Sardinia, a woman weaves these threads into silk, sea silk so light, so supple, a pair of gloves would fit into a walnut shell. Tomorrow in Ishmore, a woman will pick up a needle and yarn, knit a thick sweater, the cable pattern made by crossing one stitch over another, a pas de deux between the threads, again and again, stitching these crosses together, to form a rope so strong it holds against storm and sea. Am I wrong to want you to live soft and open in this world? Right now, I want to knit you a sweater to keep you warm, to keep you from unraveling, to remind you of the tensile strength of tender threads of attachment. Your face is as soft as sleep, as open as the shimmering bay behind us. You twist the shiny new clatter ring round your middle finger, unused to its heft, its hands and heart pointed upward, open to love. Thank you.
Picture this, number 111, just waving, not drowning. The Communist Manifesto, written by Nina Simone, born 1933, is different from the one written by Karl Marx, 1848, as is the one written by NASCAR, born 1948, or by Malcolm X, assassinated in 1965, or the one known to Reverend Dr. Billy Graham, noted anti-Semite, born 1918, who cited his version of the Communist Manifesto on his deathbed as his likely cause of death, 2018, with someone on the tape of his last words in the background screaming, "This is the world you all have made yourselves, certainly, but can't you alls ever even make your own goddamn beds for once? You pack of thankless grifters." And then there's some other stuff about faith and about Jimmy Hoffa's body and who really shot JFK. But it's chaotic. There's shooting. Maybe it's a Vietnam flashback or the TV and praying. And it's hard to tell truly what's going on. Maybe the CIA. And that is why come everybody gets the Communist Manifesto they believe in and maybe even deserve. Maybe, says Maybelline, last voice on the tape. Maybelline, supposedly Hazel the maid's working girl's sinister sister, of whom it was once said she knew where all the bodies were buried, and if not, could at least recognize them by their bottoms. All of them Marxists, including Chico and Groucho, and their Communist Manifesto, and its big bottom, and the seemingly endless parties that hardly made no sense at all in the end, but took up most of the 20s plus 1 centuries that some called a life. Anyway, Kentucky Man, number 5. Alligators at Western Ohio like to think of their live prey as hot pockets, say the interviewers at Tastes of Cincinnati. And no, they don't like Skyline chili, but who really does, says a sympathetic Kentucky man talking to his buddy High Pockets, the dribbler, former basketballer, and adult diaper wearer, who himself prefers the hot brown, open-faced turkey sandwich from the Brown Hotel at Louisville, which coincidentally, alligators of central Kentucky also prefer, especially the Kentucky Skyline chili. I mean, what's with the fucking spaghetti, says one Kentucky alligator of Jackson Purchase, Kentucky, to name just one quotee, who is also an enthusiast of horse racing and thoroughbred horse hot pockets, according to the editors at Kentucky Eats Most Everything Good Monthly, particularly with hot gravy, though near everybody in the alligator food community still prefers live Hot Pocket Central Kentucky men and woo men and women sans gravy, upright, walking, or even staggering, singularly so if they've just come from a bourbon tasting near Frankfurt. Why, it's like drinks and dinner all at the once, says the Kentucky Alligator Food Critic Alliance. Go Big Blue. And that is why you look twice before you swim in the Kentucky River, says Dribbler to his friend Kentucky Man. And as usual, it's the end, if and you get bit, most likely. For I served a little time up there at LaGrange with 8 or 10 of them alligators, and I'll witness to you right now, you don't want to get mixed up with them all. No way, not no how.
So grateful that everybody connected with the journal. It gives people like me hope to write tomorrow and maybe the next day after that. So thank you so much. I have a couple poems about Florida. So I'm going to start with the first one that's in the current issue of the magazine. It's called Tug. The eastern moon crosses the intercoastal waterway between Don Pedro Island and the mainland at Panama Street. Painters dressed like white historians and roofers drinking from plastic bottles of Propel ride in cargo vans each morning to the island. Shuttle back at 4 o'clock. Cable grease stains the crew's green fluorescent safety vests, and diesel exhaust lifts like onyx smoke black on every trip. 8 people stayed on Don Pedro during Hurricane Ian, 9 if you count the homeless walk-on. Her body was her closet where she wore all her clothes, nightgowns and scarves, a purple knit hat, and black leggings. She squeezed her lit cigarette between a set of knuckles in the chain-link fence surrounding the auxiliary fuel tanks, a gift to the spirits asking for kindness before she disembarked. I watched from my pilot house, the size of a confessional. She was in no hurry. She knew to run when the shrieks are over the big water, not when they are on top of you. She was my last passenger of the day, and tomorrow would be the first one to discover our new planet, liquid Earth. As she stepped off the gangway across the sun-salt and into the mangrove forest, plumes of cirrus frozen in the sky, I marked her as STL, stateless, on the manifest that was rolled inside a repurposed PVC pneumatic tube. Regulations prohibit the release of personal information to the public in ships' manifests. Guard would know where, but not who she was. I'd like to think someone would find her floating on an island spillway, her clothes spread out like Ophelia, but instead of flowers, holding solitary ground beans she rescued from certain death. I wrote that poem after the last hurricane, and a lot of that landscape is gone now. And here's another one where more landscape is gone. This poem is called Othello. Every day in General English 4, the Puerto Rican kid and I look out the window at the maintenance guys whose summer jobs have turned into their whole lives. He has 18 weeks of independent study to translate Othello to Spanish, to put a language he doesn't understand into his own words. Wear your heart on your sleeves, he says to me. Whose hands can they be? Whose hearts, if not our own? Fridays, we steal out and walk under the sign, beach access private, that leads to Blind Pass, empty vacation rentals crowding one another for a better view of the end of Florida. We search for mermaid money and sea glass, and he says, turn towards me, Guerra, as we sit on resort furniture, sounding like a boyfriend rather than a dentist. The yellow and black cover of his Cliff Notes on Shakespeare's Othello that I read to him looks like do not cross police tape. I have trouble explaining why Iago betrays his friend and why Othello strangles Desdemona. It's easy to lie in lines that rhyme at the end, like Valentine's or church hymns. Someone or other is always dying or wanting to die in these plays. Even though it's not real, people hurt each other, and we're forced to listen to them, then read cheat sheets that explain what exactly is going on. And thank you so much again.
Happy to be back in the South Florida Poetry Journal again. It was around 3 years ago, and it wasn't the first readings I gave. So I'm going to read two poems, one of which is in this issue of SoFloPoJo, which I wrote in a workshop during the first year of my MFA with Nick Flynn. It's titled After You Left. After you left, I put the engagement ring in the drawer next to the condoms. Then I went to JR's bar when the residue of the day had drained away, and the night was deep enough to swim in, yet not deep enough to drown. The weak leakage of the moon dripped down the skyscrapers, and the thud of the techno music seemed to bend time, blared louder as I got closer and went inside. I downed a shot of vodka, but then a glance at my swollen reflection in a window brought me back to that night when you crammed all the boxes in your car, kissed me, and said, "I love you," in a voice so quiet I still can't hear it. The city was near silent for once, only a train's lone horn miles away, the heat of our bodies, the scent of your hair as we hugged, and me saying, "I love you," back. But then I came back to the feeling of a new guy's hands on my waist, to lights bending off the walls, and the song saying, "How did it end up like this?" I let the guy buy me a shot, leaned into him, let him grab my hand, and guide me out. The second poem I will read is titled Anorexia Nervosa. Anorexia Nervosa. It led my mother to check if my slumber was a cold one. I'd sleep until the late afternoon as the light tried to break into my shuttered windows. I still remember how she would hover over me as I lay wrapped in ragged blankets, attentive to my breath, to my heart, almost imperceptible at 40 beats per minute. It was later I learned that her parents were the same, she having been anorexic too. I didn't know my bones would be riddled with osteoporosis. I only knew that flesh strung taut over bone was a way to pass days where existence was little more than the empty bowls of my hips and the collarbones that protruded razor-like through my skin. Emptiness was what filled me, and she had Treza's disease in which every paradox is a delight, the illness of inverted success. Standing over me, did she think of her own parents? I remember watching her slip back out, the gentle click of my door, leaving me with the silence of my own bones. Thank you.